All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So anybody that's joining us, thank you so much for joining us. We are Counter Collective, and we are presenting our Counterpoint on White Theater conversation, a conversation that is focusing on Black and Latinx theater leaders. With us, we have three of Chicago's most amazing, in my opinion, theater leaders. And I'm gonna turn it over to them in a moment to introduce themselves. During the conversation though, there is a live chat going on, and if at any time you'd like to ask any questions to us or to comment on anything, I encourage you to do so. One of our ensemble members is standing by and watching all of that and sending it to us. So I'm gonna hand it over to you three. First, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Helem, and I'm an ensemble member for Counter Collective.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chatman. I am a director, writer, producer, educator of 17 years at the University of Chicago Charter School, but I am also a founder and artistic director of the Tofu Chitlin circuit. I'm going to turn it over to Myrna.
Hi, everyone. Hola, buenas tardes. I am Myrna Salazar. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Chicago Latino Theater Alliance, better known for one of its events, the Destinos International Latino Theater Festival. I do not want to say how many years I've been doing arts and culture in the city of Chicago, but it's probably longer than some of your mothers. So therefore, I'm going to turn it out now to Derrick.
Hi, I'm Derrick Sanders. I'm a director producer on a faculty at UIC. I'm co-founder of the Congo Square Theater and founder of the August Wilson Monologue Competition of Chicago.
Wow.
Great, thank you all so much. So, I mean, collectively, we have many years of knowledge, of leadership here in this conversation, and I'm excited for that. I'm gonna get us straight into it because we've got an hour and I wanna make sure that we cover all our topics. Our first question being, do you believe, and I'm gonna go ahead and direct this question to Myrna, do you believe that white theater leaders are doing the best that they can right now?
That is a loaded question, of course, and it's also a very subjective, could be, you know, as far as I know, it's very subjective. Are they doing enough? No, they could do better. With the industry having been shut down for so many months, and since theaters will be the last to reopen because the artists have been the most affected, and so many people being furloughed, and so many positions that perhaps are held by people of color in these theaters are going to be eliminated. It would be interesting to know, once it reopens, how many of those people are they going to call back? It would be interesting to see who they're going to hire and who rehire and who's going to keep their positions. And with all the conversation that is going on in many institutions, specifically those of white institutions of equity and inclusion, it would be a great way to measure how much they're going to be doing for this segment of the industry, specifically for people of color.
Derrick?
Yeah, I thought Sydney can go. That's a great one.
I knew you were gonna do that, but okay. So the question is, are white theaters doing enough? I guess my pushback and counter question is, do we need white theaters to do enough for us? And I challenge and I push and I encourage and I uplift people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, to make space for themselves. And I know that's probably hard to do when we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're in the middle of the unrest that's happening in our country, but this is actually the perfect time to say no more will I invest in institutions that don't serve me, and I want to do something about it. So this is the time to me. This is the time to start looking into finding spaces that feel safe to oneself, and finding like-minded people to work in that particular facility or that space. So that's my counter answer to that.
That's great. Both of you have hit the nail on the head, I think. And so I'm gonna go for another angle. I'm gonna say that they are, depends on who you're talking about, first of all. You know, are they doing their best? And I would say no, they have no incentive to do their best. I mean, this is not a thing. You know, for many years, Chicago was the most segregated city in the nation, right? So now all of a sudden, do you think they get to 2000 and then they forget all that past? It is, they don't diversify unless they have motivation. And that motivation is cash. That motivation is money from corporations, foundations, and
Government.
if they don't have it, government, absolutely. Federal government should be supporting it. But it's like if they don't have that money that's coming in, they don't have the people. And Black people and people of color are not a significant portion of their money. I will give you an example of a theater on the South Side. There is a theater on the South Side that used to do strictly classic works, only from white men mostly, right? And then they found this one Black artist, and they found a Black writer, and they found out there were Black people on the South Side of Chicago. And then all of a sudden, it was the majority of their work. So they don't have incentive if there's no money involved. Now, recently, there are some smaller theaters who are coming there and they want to be alliance. They're pushing forward. They really want to be, they should, all the stories should be at the table. I'm not necessarily talking about those. I'm talking about the ones who've been around for 15 years or more. You know, if you've been around for 15 years or more, you have no investment in making sure Black, brown, or indigenous people of color, LGBTQ, you have no, you're serving your audience base. And if it's not, you're not trying to reach out because you don't have to. That's the real answer.
Thank you.
Did I go too hard? I'll pull back. I'll pull back if you need me to.
No. That's great. That's great. That's great. That's why we're having this conversation. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry, Sydney.
No, I was just saying that, you know, there's a lot more to that. That's a very loaded question, like Myrna said. You know, there's so many different ways to look at it, and it really comes down to how you enter and how you've navigated the space of the American theater. I would say, y'all, my lights came on. Thank God. Okay, I have lights now, y'all. Just so you know, my power was out because there was a whole power outage, but now it's back on. So now I look like I'm glowing. So I just sorry, got distracted.
See, you talk well about white people and they work magic for you. They turn on your lights like that. See, you get the key, you get smart.
I had to fight for those lights to come back on because I'm paying for that service. So, but no, I just, you know, I feel like sometimes the point of view comes from your entry point into the American theater. You know, I've always wanted to work in a particular type of theater. I only wanted to work with a particular type of group of people. So when I have that, you know, so thinking about it in terms of what the American theater can do for me, I just never really thought about it because I was always only thinking about Black theater. I was thinking about youth theater, Black theater for kids and youth and young people. So, so that's why my answer is like, you know, the pushback is not necessarily what someone can do for me or if they've done enough. I'm always looking at the other side of that, even if, you know, even without a lot of resources, I put myself in that position to work in that way. So.
Well, sometimes I have to ask, what is American theater? Mm. It's not like we haven't been here. We've been here forever. Blacks, Indigenous, Latinos, Irish, British, Indian. So therefore, when we are working in theater, we are working in American theater, and let's not put color to the theater, for heaven's sakes. We have to put color to our stories, told by our first voice. It's telling our own stories, from our own experiences, because culture, that's how it's driven, and we are part of this melting pot. And this is the way I see it. So when somebody asks, what is American theater? To me, American theater is all of us collectively. What hasn't happened is being able to leverage the dollars that go to the people of color versus white institutions. So
Absolutely.
that's the way I see my position.
Absolutely. I mean, they make us have to fight for every single red penny. So hard. Now, everyone does. Everyone has to fight for it because art is not valued as it should in America, right? But they make us prove every year. It was like, how is Congo Square different from Black Ensemble? It was like, have you gone to any of those theaters? You're saying because we're both a similar color that we're doing the same thing? You know, you don't wonder about that. White theaters when there are over 200 of those in Chicago. You don't ask any of them that. So why would you come here and ask me, why do we need more than one, Black theater? You don't ask it, you imply it and make me prove it. So you make me sweat. And also, I have been on a couple of these foundations. I'm sure Myrna has too. Been on these foundations and they nitpick over our budgets. They dig in our budgets and wonder about stuff. And I was on this one panel where it just so happened that we went over a certain theater. It was a national panel. So we went over a certain theater's profile, and who was presenting, they passed through. They said, oh yeah, they're a great theater. They're doing well. You know, they had a little hard time, but it looks great. Everything looks great. And then it was like, they looked at their budget. It was like, oh, that looks fine. Let's move on to the next one. The next day we had to come back because that morning it was announced on the news that they were closing because of financial, they were in the hole so far. And then I said, why didn't we pick over their budget? Why didn't we investigate their budget like we do some of these people of color? And it is because they believe they don't buy that it's getting its bang for its buck. Their white friends aren't going to theaters in Pilsen and theaters in Humboldt Park. They're not coming to the South Side. So it is not as important as Steppenwolf and Goodman. And even if the leaders are, and I will say, because I know some leaders who are doing the work, even if they are, it is not going all the way down to their box office. It's not going down to their ushers. It is, if you would like me to, I will talk to your leader. And I would have to say that to some people, and they'll go, oh, no, you don't need to do that. And then they'll go, because I know where your leader stands, but the rest of y'all don't, so there's a lot more work to do.
It sounds like, that sounds like more of a conversation of financial resources too. We could talk about the theater all day long, but if the foundations and the institutions that are distributing this money and the government is distributing this money doesn't find value in us because we don't have the years or because we're not white, then it's more to it than that. I've just been noticing how the We See You movement has been gaining a lot of traction, and I wish to push the conversation even to institutions, even predominantly white institutions that have theater programs that are not centering people of color in their programs. So it's all a cyclical thing. It's the universities, it's the foundations, it's the theaters, it's all of these entities together that's telling us our stories are not valid enough because we don't have a certain demographic that they want to serve.
Well, Derrick said
Yeah,
hit right on the spot.
I'm gonna jump in right. Go ahead, Myrna. Go ahead, Myrna.
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. If we can go ahead, I'm gonna transition into a conversation about these institutions. So if we can go ahead and put up that first piece of information regarding institutions. So we surveyed 5 Chicago theaters here with a budget of $3 million or more, some of them with a $10 million budget. And what we found was that for their 2019-2020 season, that they had executive and artistic leadership was 0, people of color or indigenous people. But almost all of them had 3 or more people of color in their ensemble or associate artists. Of these same 5 theaters, if we take all of the productions, and of course we took the 2019-2020 season for what it should have been pre-COVID, there were 31 productions cumulatively, and 12 of them were written by people of color or had a POC narrative. So, I mean, that's less than half of the theater productions that were scheduled for this upcoming year at the largest institutions. So I'm wondering, with that in mind, should predominantly white theaters really be able to continue producing if their executive and artistic leadership does not reflect the work on stage?
I cannot answer that because I do not have my own theater. I am an alliance that supports the Latinx community, the Latino theater community in Chicago. And one of the things that we instituted with the alliance is that these stories are told by them, new stories, fresh stories that are not necessarily your classic adaptations of the white traditional theater. So therefore, it's very much more difficult for me to say to answer that question. I like to see more stories being told by us, first voice, perhaps in Spanish with English subtitles in many of these institutions.
You know, I ultimately think that out of 31 productions, 5 is not enough sample to actually gauge Chicago theater. But so I don't think 5 is quite enough to do a good sample size of Chicago. But I get your point. I see what you're doing. I actually think 12 out of 31 it's way better than it has been in Chicago. So that's moving in the right direction. I do think that a lot of these theaters don't support training and elevation of people of color in institutions. And I would say if they went out tomorrow and they just started grabbing all the qualified people of color to be at the head of their institutions, there would be not enough to go around, I think. But that is because they don't set up a legacy because they're not invested in that. They're not invested in the power of making it feel like a home, and it's time that we claim that American theater is our home now. I can't tell you how many theaters that I have gone into where I'm the director and they're selling the tickets to my show, and I get questioned every time I go in for a rehearsal. They go, "Can I help you?" And I go, "No." And they'll go, "Well, what can I do for you?" And I was like, "I'm doing that for you." And I point to my poster, huge as day, with my name on it. And some of that is just the culture of different places. But I think ultimately, if you have a person of color, the whole system adjusts. I saw it at Baltimore Center Stage. I saw it, I've seen it happen. The whole system adjusts. It becomes friendlier to people of color. It becomes friendlier for people that don't look like the heads of the theater. And if they've taken it seriously, then they're seriously looking to it. But the reality of it is that people are very reluctant. They'll do all the things that you're asked. except give up power. That is the one thing they won't do. They will change the color of the White House to black, but they will always keep white people in control. So until they're willing to give up that power, you know, you're just a figurehead. And even if it is a black person at the head of that, all the boards are white. So you're answering to the masters anyway, you know? So it never ends. It's just a cycle. And some black people would be happy with that. They would be happy doing Brigadoon every year and being the black one that made it in the white institution, right? But I don't think that's enough. It was like, how can I be supported at the board table when everyone around me is not, you know, or the majority of people around me are white, you know? Because ultimately you have to answer to them, even if they put you out front and say, go and make us look liberal.
Which takes us to another issue, is the composition of board members in our respective theaters. How many of the board members are actually financially stable to give you sufficient dollars like they do to the white institutions? Because I know a lot of Latinos with a lot of power and a lot of money, and they serve on those boards. And so when you go to them to ask for those kinds of monies or for those dollars or to serve on your board, they feel that it's just, they're fine serving on the most prestigious board because it's the right thing to do. When we talk about power, I think that power should be shared. When you said that even if you were the head of the organization, but you have to report to a white board, I just feel that it is depending what it is that you are, how strong you come across. I feel that we own our own power. I guess I'm old enough to say that I am powerful, but you also have to be fearless. And sometimes I feel that I am fearless.
I'm gonna move us on over to that, because I think that the conversation of boards, you know, we've seen a lot of conversations lately about the idea that by diversifying the leadership, that problems will be fixed, right? And as we know, a board of directors has a lot more power over a theater than we really want to accept sometimes, right? It's not just the executive and artistic director that gets to make the decisions on the direction of the company. So we're gonna throw up a recent study from WTTW that was posted on WTTW, but done by Northwestern. And if we can go ahead and put that up. So what you're gonna see in this is that the wealth distribution in America is about 8 cents to the dollar for Latinx people, 1 cent to the dollar for Black people. And income is a little closer. It's 47 cents to the dollar and then 48 cents to the dollar. I bring this up, and I think this is important to look at, just because in order to be on a theater board, you have to have a certain amount of wealth, right? You have to be able to say that you can financially help fill gaps, right? Or that you can match a donation and things like that. So I wonder, if there's such a large disparity in wealth, are Black and Latinx people given a fair shot? Do we even have the money to be able to be on boards at the same rate that white people are?
Wow. No.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, that graph is shocking, and it makes me angry, and it makes me if you want to talk about slavery and how we've been disenfranchised, just look at that. Because the kind of wealth we're talking about is not, I'm not talking about the super rich who are at the head of these corporations, because there are a lot of Blacks and Latinx people who are at corporations, Tribune Company, and you know, head of these corporations. Some are very powerful. It's not as many as whites, but we're talking about this. We're talking about the random
It's very small.
Yeah, the random patron who has $1 million at their disposal. You don't know her. You don't know. She doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? She's not extraordinary. You know what I mean? She just has wealth because either her grandfather gave it to her, or her father passed it down to her, or they have expendable money, right? And I think that keeps us, and we keep on comparing ourselves to these white theaters, and corporations and foundations do too. They look at us and go, why can't you be like Steppenwolf? Why can't you be like Goodman? Looking Glass pulled themselves up by the bootstrap. Y'all should do more. We'll do a matching grant. And it was like, we don't have access to the same amount of money, and you know that. And we don't. So what do I have to do? In order to get a matching grant, I now have to go and ask white people to share, right? And I have to ask them to share. And if I could tell this real quick story, I have a funder who funded Congo Square very early on. I've told this before, but very early on, and she gave $1 million to a couple theaters across the city. So I went to see her, and I scheduled a meeting. And she was a lovely lady, really beautiful house, right on the Lakeshore Drive, right? And one of the questions she asked me was, she said, why did you come and ask me? And I was like, well, I know you're a giver to theater, and, I know that you enjoy theater, and, we're coming up. And then she was like, no, who runs Ebony and Jet? The Johnsons live just below me in a penthouse below me. Why wouldn't you go to them? And I said, well, they have the Negro College Fund, and they have other things that they give to. They don't necessarily give to arts. I thought you were a supporter of Chicago art, so that's why I'm here. She was satisfied with that answer and understood, and the first time, and this is how it works, right? The first time, I thought we're going to give, I thought we'd go get 10 grand or, 12, 20 grand. That would be great, And the first year she gave us $500, and she told me she was going to give us something. She gave us $500. And I was like, wow. And the message to me at the end of the day is like, if you can't get your own people to support, I support what I want to see. I support the images that I want to see. And if you can't get your people to support it, don't come ask me. So I think, again, foundations, corporations, and federal have reparations to give, and they can help us with this wealth gap with artists. I would, for Congo Square, I would give our tickets away for free if they were funding our season, and not look at us to have access to the same amount of wealth as Looking Glass, Goodman, or Steppenwolf.
I agree with you, Derrick, and I wonder, and I'm like the cog in this whole system, because I wonder how much longer will theater in its current state survive? Is it a sustainable practice? Can we continue to keep having board members with money to then fund a play for a season? Like, is that actually realistic? Especially looking at where we are right now. We're literally in a pandemic. We're literally dealing with unrest and racial tension in this country. So if we are the last organization, last genre of art to even come back, is this sustainable, right? So when you thinking about like asking or looking for funding and money, we may have to think about other ways in which to do that. And I noticed that, yeah, we may not have a lot of money right now, but because I do believe that the reparations will happen. We just heard, I don't know if you all heard about this, but there's a city in North Carolina who just received reparations in that city that's close to Charlotte. It's a smaller town. So, this conversation is happening and it's possible, and I'm all for it. But I wonder if we have to change the model of where we're asking for these funds to be able to do the work that we want to do. And then maybe this work that we're doing has to be more community-based and community-driven, that it's not an institution with the big space that just says, okay, on these days we have a play, and then the institution closes its doors, and then you come back when we do something else. Maybe this institution has to consider the community at large. Maybe it's more than just a theater. Maybe it's an education facility. It is it's a workforce programming. Maybe it's other things that this institution has to do in order to include the community that will then build a sense of mutual aid, so that my little funds that I have, that's going to that I can offer for this month. Every month I'm giving $100, $150, $1,000, which is not going to be as much as maybe a person with generational wealth, but that $1,000 may then connect to someone else with $1,000, and so on and so on. But I think it comes down to like, again, I don't know if we can keep asking the same people for what we need when these same people are not even considering us. And to hear that story, Derrick, it's hurtful to hear that that this is what we're going through to even try to get our work produced, right? So again, I feel like I'm a cog, because I'm like, I don't know if we can keep asking the same people for support. We're gonna have to open our spaces to our community and really tap into the resources of people who actually have a little bit of something that may not know how to use it and how to invest in it and see the investment in it, because no one has actually asked them.
I think it's creating the awareness. It always amazed me how the larger institutions have what is called the season subscribers, and sometimes their season subscription has been sold 2 years in advance. So when I ask our Latino theater community, those very few, there's only 2 or 3 that have their own space, if they have subscribers, I think it's changing the mindset and trying to find a way to institute within those institutions subscriptions, so that at least we have those dollars, the dollar stream coming into those theaters, whether it be the $10 a ticket, or whether it be the $25, or whether it be the $80 a ticket, which I don't see yet in one of our storefront theaters. But that is a formula that I love to see implemented in organizations of color, specifically theaters and artists they would love to sell that season, whether it's 1 show or 3 shows per season.
And I hear what you're saying, Myrna, but I also want to say that in this generation and where we are, no one wants to be on a payment plan. We are in the world. We have a Netflix account that somebody else is using. I my password to like 4 people in my family that I'm paying for, but it's the I don't care.
You're going live on this one.
That's real, but the reality is we couldn't all afford our own Netflix, right? So all of us, and even though it's a $8 whatever, in some ways we are all taking, I have the Netflix account, somebody's got the HBO, somebody's got something else. And so in some way we are sharing the wealth of those particular, those organizations in order to be able to have some form of entertainment, right? So when I think about, is the subscriber base really, is it working? Does it work? I don't know, because we don't want to be, this generation does not want to be committed to anything. With that Netflix, I can cut it off in a month. I can say, well, you know what, I don't have it this month. I can cancel it, and then I've had it for the month, and I'm okay with that, right? Because then I can go to somebody else and say, hey, yo, can I borrow your Netflix account? We don't do that with the theater. So the theater is, you got to be in this subscription base. You have to come to see the theater in this time, in this particular experience, where, and then once that play is gone, it's gone. Where in the world that we're living in, there's access to things that you can see a little bit later down the road, right? So I hear what you're saying about subscribing, but I don't know if this is the generation of subscriptions. We're like, okay, I got it for this month, and then that's it,
But that's a funding streaming that some of these organizations do have.
I would like to say, go back to what Sydney originally said. And I think, we're going to have to look theater dead in the eye. And I agree. Can it survive? I'm not sure in this model, but the way it's set up now, some institutions are built to survive in this. The white institutions are built to survive in this. The Goodman is called the Goodman, not because Goodman is a great person in theater, historical theater. I think they made their money off of paper or something, right? Timber.
No, they started in 1927, I believe, with a grant, not a grant. Somebody left $250,000 to them. And back then, 1927, $250,000 translates into.
No, I'm talking about the Goodman family. I'm talking about the Goodman family. The Goodman family made their money in timber or something like that, right? And then they decided, hey, I want my name on something in Chicago, and they decide to give to that, right? So let's look at theater for what it is. It is either a patronage model, a capitalist model, or an exploitative model. Now, at its worst, it's all three, but more than likely, it's a combination of at every point, right? And I think, we can say we can go into the community, but what are we going to pay our people livable wages? How are you going to pay them livable wages? Unless, how the Goodman, how Looking Glass, how all of them did, but they were invested in their own stories. But we've been disenfranchised. Now what? You can't just say we should do it for our own communities, even though our communities have done it, right? Tyler Perry is a multi-millionaire. He built that studio in Atlanta with touring the nation, but it's exploitative. It is exploitative in terms of how he makes his money. He comes into a community, he gives you low base, stories, that feel good and are funny, right? And those work. Right? And people pay for him. And then he goes to the next town, hits that next town up. And he made millions doing that, right? So it's not like Black people don't have the money. They have the money across the nation, and he collected it, and exploited people because of it, And I know he did. I'm aware that he did, right? But I'm not saying he didn't do, as a capitalist, he didn't do anything that the railroad people didn't. The people who built the railroads didn't do. The people who built institutions didn't do. But we can't look at it and say we can go into our communities and pay artists livable wages that way. We can't. They can't eat. How would they eat? And I think how would they build families if they want to invest back in a community who has ultimately been separated from the profiteering of America?
I do want to jump in here. I hear what everyone's saying. It's interesting, Myrna, that you would bring up subscriptions, because in the research there and looking at the TCG Theater Communications Group, Theater Facts 2018, which is a nice little capture of where theater is financially, right? They found that there was a rise in single ticket sales, and that people are actually kind of separating themselves from the idea of, a subscription, and you buy a subscription to a theater and that's where you go for the whole season. You know what I mean? Or you buy a subscription to 2 or 3 theaters and those are the 3 that you go to for the entirety of the season, I think that people are starting to think that they want access to art wherever it's available. And I want to bring that access back in because part of everything everyone's saying here is an access to something, right? And if there are no theaters in predominantly African-American and Latinx theaters and Latinx communities, and so they don't have access to theater, will they want to? Will they be as interested in engaging with it if they don't know about it, right? Because Netflix, Hulu, things like that, we know about them. They're everywhere, right? They're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. Their marketing is everywhere. People talk about it in memes, right? So there's a connection to it on a social level, right? There's a connection to it on a community level, right? If someone is growing up and has grown up without any access to theater for their entire life, when they do have the money to go to theater, will they want to spend their money there, right? They've never felt welcome, right?
So,
And we define theater so often, right? If we look at the theater that's taught in a lot of English classes, it's Romeo and Juliet, right? And so if I've never been to a theater, right, and my only interaction was Romeo and Juliet in high school, now that I have money, right, I'm an adult, I'm an African American adult, am I gonna want to spend $30 to go see a play, right? I've never seen myself there. I've never felt as though that was my home in any way. But I can turn on Netflix and Hulu, right? And I will see a show that, written by a person of color, features stories of people of color, right? So I wonder if access is a huge barrier to getting people of color to the theater.
by
It's also
all
marketing
means.
too. I'm sorry, go ahead. It's
No,
also,
no, go on, Sydney.
oh, I was just gonna say it's also marketing. It's, I understand the using Netflix as a model of that, but it's also how much money a person has to be able to share the information in the community. The other thing is this, and because I am a huge advocate for young people and theater in their communities, once you have received that degree or the knowledge, it is imperative that you share that information with someone else that is younger than you. And I love what Derrick is doing with the August Wilson monologue competition. That's just a prime example of that. Of just seeing like these young kids, these young people are accessing August Wilson as a first in their native tongue, in their tongue, opposed to having to do the Shakespeare and the other shows, So I feel like in that same idea, in order for all of this to kind of be, we have to be our own Netflix. That's what I'm saying. That if you have had access to an education that is in a second, in a PWI or wherever, or HBCU, the next level of that is, let me share this information with someone else that's younger than me, because then they will have access to it as well. I don't necessarily think that my students are going to be artists. I don't see that, but they will have an appreciation for theater. They will know that they come from a legacy of Black artists that came before them, from Ira Aldridge to Paul Robeson to Katherine Dunham. They will know those names because I am an advocate that we cannot lose our history. And so my the griot in me is telling them, is giving them those stories. So I think that yes, Netflix or the idea of Netflix has the money to be able to market, but we have to be our own Netflix.
How long has that been happening, Derrick or Sydney? How many years can we go back in saying that those are that the young folks can identify with those stories when it were seen in theaters? How many years ago? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 25, 40 years ago?
When your question is how long?
Based on what you're saying right now, how long, when you see yourself identified to those stories, when did you become aware?
She's doing that now. She's actively trying to pursue that. She's actively trying to do that. I think there are kids who grew up. I have students who now we have students from August Wilson who are in the profession, who are in the world, and they have that experience, and I think it's starting to change, but they have to get access. That's what doubled down on me as a part of, as you mentioned, reparations. I think it should be included in the arts, and the art should be part of it. So you could be able to take to the Mexican Fine Arts Museum or Teatro Luna, Teatro Vista. You could be able to have a pass to be able to go to the cultures just because you are disenfranchised. If you're over a certain tax bracket, then you should pay, absolutely pay, but if you're not, then it should be covered by Target, Walmart. It should be covered by those people who have an investment in a community raising itself and being proud of itself, and if I'm going to make money from you, then I should be invested in your community.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I posed the question is because obviously I'm old enough to know and have experienced many things in my professional trajectory. Back in the day, I used to own the first Latina-owned talent agency And I used to go to the talent showcases that most of the universities used to invite the talent agents and producers and directors. And many a times I would ask casting directors, they were teachers within those institutions, what were they doing to recruit Latino youngsters into their program? How are they opening those opportunities for Latinos to come into their theater program? And they were uncomfortable with that question. So I never saw, I went to theater 3 times to 4 times a week because they're having a talent agency. That's where I would pull my talent from. And it was sad to see that they knew very little about Latino artists. And so I grew up in a home where my father was a poet. He used to play the guitar, el requinto, el cuatro. He would sing and I would sing. I would know the history of songs and music. And as growing up as a little girl, I never wanted to be a teacher or a doctor, or you know how little kids play and they give you the doll to be the housewife and all. I used to always play off like I was going to be an actress. So I am a frustrated actress that never made it into stage, but I love it. So from my point of view, that opportunity was not afforded to my community back in the day, and it's not fast enough coming. And I would like to see more Latinos going into the theater community. There are work opportunities in this industry, whether it's on stage, whether it's behind cameras, whether it's in. So there is a huge industry out there, and unfortunately, Latinos don't feel like they have that access.
Well, I mean, definitely at UIC now, Latinx people are the majority group in our theater program, and that's partly for the work of August Wilson, my law competition. And it's partly because people of color now say you can go there and feel welcome. You know, you can go there, and it's been a struggle. It's still a struggle, you know, because white establishment likes to make itself comfortable. So they were more concerned about them being comfortable than the student body being comfortable, right? So I can't necessarily advocate for kids to come to the school and get them in there and have them be excited and be in there, and then watch them in your class as y'all try to make yourselves comfortable. So we're having those ongoing discussions, but we're definitely pushing forward. But also freedom, you know, I think, you know, you have to be shown a path. And I think shown that it can be done, and that there is a way to work. You know what I mean? I think a lot of things that are important. When I talk to parents, you know, they want to know, is their kid going to work? You know, and I can assure them that they can. There's ways to work. You know, in Chicago more now than ever.
Yeah, I want to.
Can I just add this last thing and then I'll stop? But just to add a little bit of perspective and clarity, culturally, Black people in this country, well, we had to create a culture from slavery. We had other parts of our culture that were taken from us, from the drum to our stories. So when you think about how, why don't we see more, you know, and fill in the blank? Why don't we see more of this and then fill in the blank or whatever that is? It's because we have lost, or our culture was taken from us. So we're trying to figure out how to navigate a country that, you know, we were never included in. We were in the Constitution 3/5 of a human being. So when you're asking someone, why don't we know, or why don't young people know? That's because they didn't know. And I can't fault someone who grew up in an institution or a family that didn't consider art as a part of our DNA. Because what I was told when I was a kid was like, you're gonna be a doctor. You know, I have 5 sisters. It was like, you're the doctor, you're the dentist, you're the OBGYN, like you're gonna take care of all of us. So, you know, so now that I'm an adult, I'm like, well, I love science, but I don't want to be a scientist. I want to go into theater. And that was a hard sell. It was hard to prove that that this is a part of who I am. It's a spiritual thing that I can't even explain. as much as I try to run away from it, it's still coming back. Right. So just thinking about, and I just want to advocate even more, if you're in this place, really reach back. It's the Sankofa model, pull back, reach back, think about what's happened in the past, or you're doomed to repeat it.
I think that what you just said is very, very interesting about the kind of family expectations, and I think that comes from our families don't want us to struggle, right? And the association with being an artist is struggling, right? And there's enough struggle that is associated with being a person of color, right? So from a family place, and I also feel this because it was one of the things that my dad told me when I said I was going to college for theater, right? That he just didn't want me to struggle, right? And so I think that as a community, we fear that struggle, right? And we do want to know that the generations behind us are going to have it even a little bit easier than we had it, financially, socially, right? We just hope that it's just a little bit better, right? So we don't want to see anyone around us take a harder route, right? And we'll say that art is the harder route, right? So yeah, I just wanted to say that. I also want to say, I sit here thinking about the education, right, and the education of theater in Black and Latinx communities, and I've always been fortunate enough, right, to go to Shy Arts for high school, UIC for college, right, and be surrounded and be able to create art with my people, right, and never feel as though I had to consistently code switch, right, in order to be comfortable as an artist. And I think that says a lot, right? Because code switching, it's taxing work, walking into spaces and constantly thinking, oh, how am I walking? How am I talking? How am I communicating, right? Are you gonna think that I'm a thug, right? Are you gonna think, do you have all these stereotypes of me, right? And being able to walk into a room with people that are from your community, you don't have to do that as much. I think that's really, really important in the arts. I'm gonna go ahead and we are almost at time. So I do wanna ask one other question, and I feel as though we've only scratched the surface, so that's pretty exciting. But with everything that we've heard today, what types of steps would you like to see from not only POC community, right, but also POC artists moving forward, right? I also want to say, how can we support you, right? How can we support Congo Square? How can we support Tofu Chitlin Circuit and Latino Theater Alliance, right? And you all are just a sample of the multiple companies that aren't on this call, but are consistently led and telling stories by people of color. So I'm gonna throw that question to Myrna if she'd like to take it. How can we support? And what would you like to see, actionable steps that you'd like us to walk away with?
I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that front. Chicago Latino Theater Alliance was basically created to support the Latino theater artists and the Latino theater companies. I think we've done a great job in the 4 years that we've been around. Being December that we were founded in 2016, is to be able to bring to the table with funders a group of theater artists to be on the table and having those conversations. There's been very little times and opportunities to bring these companies before the funders. Something that you said earlier, Derrick. They question, they make us work harder. They want to look at the budgets, who is in our board. I am not a person that's gonna write all kinds of flowery grants. I want to do our grants to come from where we're doing the work that we're doing. It's not just talk to talk, but we do the walk. That's the way I've always used that I will always reference that, because what I feel that we are doing for our Latinx theater community is bringing them to the table, is making them giving them access, opening that door of opportunities. And some of the money that has come through CLATA, we push it out to the community, to the Latino theater artists. I must say that we have given over $150,000 in just 4 years to Latino theater companies in funding that we have been able to secure. And we are proof of that. And I want to say thank you to some of the foundations that have supported CLATA, like the MacArthur Foundation, the Paul Angel Family Foundation, and so many other foundations, the Joyce, the Field, most recently the Donnelly Foundation. I mean, I can tell you some of the foundations that are now beginning to see Latinos and Latino theater artists and bringing them to the table. And it's just not us, we bring them in together. And I have to thank some of my co-founders, which is the National Museum of Mexican Art, Mr. Carlos Tortolero, Mr. Pepe Vargas. We have a responsibility with this community. And Pepe Vargas is with the International Latino Cultural Center, and Carlos Hernandez with the Puerto Rican Arts Alliance. Together, we collectively have over 150 years of arts and culture in the city of Chicago and doing programming. But now we want to just push it forward in helping the Latino. I want to say, I don't like to use the word Latinx because it's another name that was given to us, but that is the new mode. So to the Latinx community.
Sydney, if you want to go ahead and take it, and then we'll jump Derrick back in there in a second.
Okay. So when I was thinking about what we would need as a community in general, I was thinking of individual, like as an artist, again, reaching back, pulling someone up, and it not just be because they're a part of your circle, but also sharing resources. So there's a lot of different people in the community that have access to resources, or like they know about the things that are happening, the grant opportunities that are happening. There was just something that was revealed today with Congo Square, I believe, with Samuel Robson with his foundation. Or is it a foundation? No, it's a fellowship. It's a fellowship. You know, just things like that, what we should know about, that we should all be able to share information. The other thing that I think about in terms of when Derrick started to say about, you know, just volunteering and helping and supporting. But you know, I've been working in the theater for a very long time and have been producing my own work. And I can guarantee you, I can count on one hand how many people have actually come to see the work that I've done. Now, do I feel a sense of frustration about that? Derrick has seen my work, so, and he brought his daughter. So, but when I think about the work that people are doing, it doesn't require a lot. You may not be able to come and physically see it, but just sharing it, posting it, inviting people to it. You know, I'm gonna take some of Derrick's thing about volunteering your time. You know, some institutions are set up where there's an ensemble model, or there's a group of people that are kind of working in that space. But what can we do? You know, if there's already someone with your same type of vision and it aligns with your vision, then go and help and support them. And I'm not even just talking about artists. I'm talking about, you know, people, audience members. But also on the flip side of that, I honestly push for more institutions that are Black and Latino institutions to consider, you know, opening up their doors in a way to ask for that assistance and that help. Because you'd be surprised at how much we could do for that company if they ask for the support, right? There was something else I was gonna say, and once the camera froze, I wasn't able to, like, I was formulating an idea. So I'll give it back to Derrick, and then hopefully, if you have time, I can tell you what I was gonna say, because I kind of.
I think Sydney hit the nail on the head. You know, I think, you know, it's about support and out there, and also continue to do the work and understand that you, especially in Chicago, Chicago's one of these rare places that the artists of color have options. There are some cities I go to, and there's only 2 or 3 cities. It may be one Black, one Latinx theater, and I hear you, Myrna, that name was given to you.
Yeah,
I
most
consider that.
recent.
I consider that. But they don't have any options. ETA, Black Ensemble, Onyx Theater, they built careers for artists, you know. Aggie Hone, Teatra Vista, they built careers for their artists.
Urban theater in
Urban
their
theater, who's
communities.
been around here for a long time. I think there should be
Mhm.
16 now, right? They've been doing it for a while. So you can come in and you can actually make a space for yourself in places that already exist. And you don't just have to ask to be seated at the table. Instead of asking for a handout and say, hey, can I sit at your table? Can I sit at your table? Well, you keep working hard and we'll see if you can sit at the table that's special, you know, because just like Shakespeare and just like, you know, they take these classics and they take these ideas and they go, we are better than you. We are valued more. You know, we're worth more. So you should come to our table because our table is worth more, you know? And you just switch that around. It said, my worth is gold wherever I place it on, you know? It's like if I place gold on a table in Hungary, in Spain, in Africa, gold is worth its own weight, you know? And I think that's what our people have to learn, that wherever you go with your talents, with your money, it's worth it.
And just to add into that as well, thinking about, there are lots of institutions in Chicago that don't necessarily follow the same model. And I'm thinking of Global Girls as an example of that. This is a company that has been founded years ago, and I'm trying to recall all the information, but I'm trying to get like the dates and everything. But I'm thinking of Global Girls in particular because this is an institution that's founded on the South Side, Black girls on the South Side, creating work and then traveling around the world to share their work with other girls around the world. And when I tell you that, I'm just thinking of like how powerful it is to get outside of your neighborhood, wherever you live. So when you're asking me about what can we do to support, it's like there are so many other institutions that's not just in our, you know, purview that we see that's in these few theater institutions, but they're also doing theatrical work. They just don't have that necessarily that platform. So just stepping outside of the comfort. And I highly recommend, and I'll say this again, the young people need to be included in all conversations that you have. And it should not just be, this is a youth theater, and we're going to only do theater for youth on these parts of, you know, during the day so that youth can see it, that adults come and perform. I don't like that type of theater. I want to see young people having agency on stages that we can then support and highlight and uplift and amplify. So that's my my goal and my hope is that once we end this conversation, that people are running to these places and these organizations to find ways to support outside of what we normally see as our few, you know, like the few theaters we have, including those, but also expanding that idea.
I just want to say that is a great place to end. Everything that you all have said, 100%, right? I think that there is a lack of support, you know, and that is why we titled this Counterpoint on White Theater, right? Because we can consistently ask for diversity to happen, and we can consistently ask for a seat at the table, or we could actually create our own tables, or we can go to the tables where people have already provided for people that look like us. And that's why I asked the three of you all to be here, right? I think that all three of you all are, again, a sample size of a lot of people who have taken it upon themselves to create their own table, right? Rather than waiting for white institutions to make space for them. So I think that's a great place to end. And I want to thank all of you all for being here. Sydney, Myrna, Derrick, everything you all have said has been completely amazing. Thank you for going on this conversation with me. and being so open about everything.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And we should take a picture. This is just like, we should take a picture. And also, I'm going to make sure that we say Marvinetta Penn. That's her name. Marvinetta Penn runs Global Girls, and she's been doing it for several years. And I just want to make sure that I lift and amplify her name.
And thank you for Counterpoint for putting this this hard conversation together. You know what I mean? To asking the hard questions and getting those ideas out here, because we talk about them in our bubble, but to be able to have an intergenerational, racial conversation about this is important. And thank you for bringing that to the people.
I felt very honored to be asked at my age. I had told Christian, perhaps you should have asked Sarah, who happens to be a theater artist, a director, our social media, digital media for the Chicago Latino Theater Alliance. She's an amazing, staunch supporter of Latinx theater artists, being an artist herself. I said she could have probably offered a different perspective because there's 100 years difference between her and I. But I feel very honored that you asked her.
Well, definitely. These are the kind of conversations that we want to have at Counter Collective. So, thank you for being a part of it. I also want to make sure that I thank Josh Zambrano, who's been doing all of the video stuff behind this Zoom. Thank you for everything. Manny, who's been putting together all this social media stuff, and also Noah Rahim, who has been here and making sure that today could be possible, as well as Mr. Jose Ochoa from Shy Arts, and also everyone that's watching, right? I hope that every single person walks away from this conversation realizing that they can invest even more in Black and Latinx theater companies, in Black and Latinx art, right? Not just theater, dance, visual arts, music, right? I hope that everyone realizes that we can reinvest in our own community, and that I think we have leaders, obviously, in our community that we can rest assured will take us to where we want to